highly recommend, by the way. It's called the Thrive Conference. I'm just going to start out saying that because it was on my brain. They're actually starting another session right after we're done, but speakers from all over, and it's based out in Sacramento. And it'll be 3 days, so I think they're doing like 6 hours a day for 3 days, and it's free. So anyway, but we're excited because we have a better speaker than any of theirs that's going to be with us. It is the best years today. And he was with us Friday, and he's actually launching a new project that he's going to talk about more today. And he's got another presentation for us, and that's Michael Brownlee. And Michael, why don't you just say hi, and I'm going to ask you a few questions that I didn't get a chance to ask last week.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to let you pick it up with your presentation.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be back with you. Great to see you again, Wayne. And I love the color of your shirt.
Yeah. I don't know why, but I actually really do like white yellow. And there's one of my avocations is I train dogs and retrievers, and there isn't any real great scientific evidence of this, but dogs, they say, can see this yellow almost as brightly as they can see white, and they see white really well contrasted to field-related colors. They don't see orange, so that orange color mixes in with green and brown. So they oftentimes use orange objects if you want to hide them because they just won't see them. So I'm trying to make a change to get the whole community to use bright yellow rather than white. So that's my quest in life right now for this training process.
Well, it certainly makes you visible.
Right before we got started here, so my eyes are watering. There's a lot of pollen out there. So, Michael, I always ask a couple of questions of people, and I know I asked you this when we last talked several years ago before these two series sessions, but what's a tool you've been using over the last month, let's say? And it can be an internet tool, it can be a tool in your house, it can be anything that if you think of that quickly, that you'd recommend for others to use. Some kind of
Oh boy, well, because I am a writer, I use a lot of writing tools, so two of my favorites are, first of all, Scrivener for long-form publishing, putting books together, things like that. And the other one is Ulysses, which is just a wonderful writing program. I can do a lot of free-form writing in there. So those are essential tools that I use every day, all day long.
Mark, make sure to put those into the either the Q&A or the question area. Scrivener and Ulysses.
Ulysses, yeah.
Tell us about a person other than family that had great influence on you in your, say, high school, college lifetime.
Oh, high school, I can hardly remember back that far anymore. Well, it's interesting. One of the people that had a huge influence on me when I was a senior in high school in northeastern Colorado, this little town called Yuma, 2,000 people, somehow I received this book by Teilhard de Chardin, called The Future of Man. And, it was published posthumously. He was not completely excommunicated by the Catholic Church, but they put a kibosh on all of his written works. And so somehow that book came to me, and it was really influential in my life and introduced me to the whole idea of human destiny and evolution, which I'm going to be talking a little bit about today.
Cool. And then last question, and if I ask you this one when we talked a couple of years ago, you'll remember it. And it could be the same answer, it could be a different one. Tell us about some event that happened in your life that at the time was incredibly negative, but in retrospect, as you look back on it, it really worked out for the best for you in your life?
Oh boy. Well, that gets really personal fast. I don't know.
Well, and you don't have, and again, you don't have to be real detail oriented.
No. It's just that you know, I went through, like many of us, I went through a horrendous divorce about 30 years ago, and you know, so that seemed like a tragedy, and in many ways it was, but you know, I grew out of that, and if I had not taken that step, then I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here today.
Well, again, thank you for sharing that, and that actually I could relate. I had a very similar thing. Mine was almost 40 years ago now, coming up on 40 years, but. And again, it was, I couldn't even imagine that it would ever happen, and would have even happened, but it seemed awful at the time. But yes, my life wouldn't have been anything like it's been.
Yeah.
And actually, my ex-wife is still a really good friend, and I mean, it wasn't then. We went through some tough times for a while, but we actually repaired circumstances there. And then secondly, we had a young child, and we vowed that we would not let our own personal circumstances affect him if we could, as much as avoid it. Well, he's not in my house at this instant, but he will be here. He's here visiting from Texas with his family because my youngest daughter is getting married this next Sunday, and family and friends are coming in.
Oh, wow.
He just came in, and he's an amazing young man, and has two amazing grandchildren, and so I think that he would agree that we work very hard to try to not let our differences, as much as possible, not negatively affect him.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's great. That's wonderful.
You know, those kinds of stories, and Michael, you can imagine, I think we've had now, close to 250 speakers over these last 4 years, and I've asked every one of them, or close to every one of them, that question, and the answers have been very interesting and very insightful. So,
yeah.
And a guy named John Lee Dumas, who's a friend of mine, who is probably considered sort of Mr. Podcast, he teaches about it, and he does a daily podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. He's done it now for, gosh, I bet he's up to episode, 2,000 maybe already? He doesn't record them the same day he does them. He does like 10 at a time. But I've had the pleasure of being with him really early on. I met him very early in his podcasting career. And I've been at several different functions with him. Well, that is a question that he asks, not all the time, not every time that he does it.
Yeah.
But many of the time.
Yeah, good.
Well, I don't have any other questions. I want to let you get going because today I am going to have more questions at the end because it's going to be our chance to get together before you launch your new ventures.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my website off while you talk, just so I'm not distracted. And I think either Reed or Mark is going to help you with the slides if they need to, or you're going to be doing it yourself.
They're going to help me.
Yeah, one quick thing for the audience. If you have any questions, type them in, as Wayne said, and we have a gift for you in the end. So you're going to get a.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So if you stick around, yeah. All right. So over to you.
Okay, I guess that was the ball being handed to me. So, yeah, thanks, Wayne. Yeah, thanks everybody. Glad to be here again. And so this is part 2 of a pretty passionate presentation, I guess. And as I spoke about last Friday, we're all just waking up to the reality that human civilization is dying, and that the biosphere of this planet is also dying. It's an evolutionary setback. That's where we are right now. However, this does not mean necessarily that life will end on this planet or that humanity will come to an end, although it is clearly possible that that could happen. And even the Dalai Lama has acknowledged this recently. He said, we must all realize that the human race has created a situation in which its extinction is possible. Those of us who understand this must prepare ourselves and others for the very worst, while continuing to work tirelessly for the very best. Amazing, from Dalai Lama. So in this evolutionary crisis known as the Anthropocene, the most profound tragedy of all would be humanity's extinction long before reaching species maturity, before even knowing what it means to be fully human, before accepting responsibility for life and consciousness on this earth. Well, it's an obvious reality that this planet simply cannot support 8 billion people, no matter what kind of lifestyle we might try to adopt. But our evolutionary detour that I talked about last Friday has just about reached its rock bottom, its moment of maximum destruction, maximum entropy, which will result in a dramatic collapse of the human population in the next few decades. And this is just no longer avoidable. However, what our educational and scientific institutions have failed to teach us is that the force of evolution is relentless and unstoppable. Evolution always gets where it's going, no matter what obstacles and setbacks it encounters, no matter how long it takes. And Martin Luther King Jr. pointed to this decades ago, giving hope to the civil rights movement when he declared in Selma, Alabama, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, the arc of this moral universe has but one direction, and thankfully it is a moral universe. And this is the great secret that lives like a hidden flame at the heart of all of our religions and sacred traditions, and at the heart of monasteries. And the profoundly good news of our time is that the course of devastation and suffering that has been unleashed by our evolutionary detour is just beginning to give way to the emergence of an entirely new and radical phase of evolution for humanity and for this planet. Barbara Marx Hubbard, who was one of the world's great pioneers of conscious evolution, often declared our crisis is a birth. Well, I knew Barbara well enough to be able to say that she didn't fully comprehend the birth that was coming. And sadly, she died tragically here in Colorado before that clarity could come to her and before that birth could become visible. Still, she partially intuited what was possible, and I'm very grateful for what she opened up for a lot of people. What Barbara didn't understand, that what is coming is in fact already well underway, but still below the radar, as they say, is an evolutionary course correction, which we at the monastery call the deep revolution, which was initiated, it turns out, right at the moment of our departure from the natural course of evolution. And along with mathematical cosmologist Brian Swimme, the great Christian mystic and geologian Thomas Berry gave us the first clear glimpse of one of the fundamental patterns of evolution in the universe, demonstrating that cataclysm For instance, in their example, the death of a star in a supernova explosion, this always gives way to emergence. So from the supernova, new atomic elements are forged that make possible the appearance of complex life in the universe. In fact, we humans and all of life on this planet exist because of a series of supernova explosions that occurred in our cosmic neighborhood a very long time ago. And now, as our civilization and our biosphere struggle with a global cataclysm that brings us to the edge of extinction, increasingly known as the Anthropocene Epoch, we're also witnessing the emergence of something profoundly new and entirely unexpected out of the ashes of the old. And we can scarcely foresee what this will ultimately make possible on our planet and in the universe. But already we can begin to see it happening. And Arib, if you could pull up the first slide, which is just a gray slide, gray background. Yeah, just one before that. Yeah, so for several years, we have been teaching about the need for a network of what we call centers of aliveness, a new breed of enterprises that are somehow vaguely reminiscent of monasteries, and which are mysteriously contagious and generative, and which we understand that together will serve as humanity's lifeboats through the Anthropocene catastrophe and carry at least a remnant of humanity to the far shores of the Ecozoic era that Thomas Berry envisioned. And I'll share one example of a center of aliveness. So next slide, Arib. Yeah. So two young men from Denver, Eric Kornacki and Joseph Teipel, they went into the third world to volunteer and to learn. And that brought them face to face with hardship and suffering. And they realized that they needed to find ways to reverse the downward economic spiral that they knew was happening on their own home turf. Next slide. So they decided to focus on a blighted community in Southwest Denver called Westwood, which is the most economically oppressed neighborhood in the entire Denver metropolitan area. Westwood has been a notorious food desert where for most residents, the nearest supermarket was 1.5 miles away. So for this community, food was neither accessible nor affordable. Next slide, please. So Eric and Joseph formed a modest nonprofit called Revision and began assisting people in the neighborhood in growing their own food together, mostly in their yards. Next slide. With the help of neighborhood promotoras, who by the way, were actually paid by the nonprofit, in a matter of just a few years, more than 400 families in this neighborhood were producing much of their own food. Really, that's just an extraordinary achievement. Next slide. So with city government funding, they were able to acquire a rundown commercial property that was slated for redevelopment. It was going to be scraped. And that enabled leaders of the neighborhood to begin creating the Westwood Community Food Cooperative, a community-owned food hub and grocery store featuring hyper-locally produced food. Just an incredible operation. Next slide. So members of the Westwood Food Cooperative today understand that they are building long-term community wealth and are taking their economic destiny and their health in their own hands. And everything that they do, everything that they build and create will be locally owned and locally controlled. And this photo, by the way, is during Yo-Yo Ma's visit to Westwood not too long ago. Next slide. And this is just a blank slide, just leave it there a second. So we feel that enterprises like this, centers of aliveness, must emerge in every arena of human endeavor. And we're finding that individuals are showing up all over the world with extraordinary callings to serve in really diverse areas, from social justice to education, to economies, to housing, to social entrepreneurship, to even systems of jurisprudence. And individuals who are called to this work find themselves responding to extraordinary challenges everywhere. Other centers of aliveness we might consider as examples are seemingly more modest in scope, but are nevertheless contagious. They are all spontaneously inspiring the emergence of other centers of aliveness, even in other arenas of human endeavor. And as the stories of these centers of aliveness spread, the ripple effects are far-reaching. These little grassroots enterprises are symbolic of how the deep revolution is emerging as a pathway to healing and regeneration. It's a principle of evolution that centers of aliveness generate other centers of aliveness. So these exemplary projects they represent the long arc of the evolutionary force manifesting in ways that go far beyond business plans or economic development schemes. Instead, they are spontaneously arising manifestations of the deep revolution, which is a much larger process of reversing the damage of the industrial growth society and ultimately making possible the end of the Anthropocene epoch of darkness and the arrival of the Ecozoic. So a key mission of the monastery is to help catalyze centers of aliveness like this by supporting and connecting those individuals who are called to bring them into the world. And I'll share just one more example, which happens to also be here in Colorado, which is also related to food and farming. So Arib, next slide, please. Thank you. So a few years ago in Fort Collins, Colorado, a community of concerned citizens became aware of the plight of small farmers there who were struggling to expand their operations to grow more food. And one of these was Native Hill Farm, a very profitable and popular vegetable farm developed over several years by a young couple named Nick Kuntz and Katie Slota. That's them on the tractor and also on the left at a farmer's market. Next slide, please. Next slide.
I think Arib is having problem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will take over. I'm going to switch to myself.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull up your slides in a second. Okay. So
okay.
I hope everybody will see my screen now. And you just have to remind me where we were.
Yeah, it's about in the middle.
Okay.
Go about number 7.
Number 7. Okay. I think I went too far.
Yeah. Okay, go 2 more slides after that.
2 more. Okay. Wayne, we are not hearing you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, it's because I muted myself. I wasn't going to be speaking, so.
Okay. So go two more slides farther, please, Mark. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this one is blank. I think we were here, right?
Yeah. So now go to the next one after that.
Okay. So this one.
That one, thank you. Great, brilliant. So Nick and Katie were leasing a total of about 8 acres, and that was all on small plots, 2, 3 acres or less on the edge of the city. And what they wanted to do was to consolidate and to expand their operations to meet growing community demand for local organic food. But developers in the Fort Collins area had driven up the price of farmland to more than $30,000 an acre, which is just prohibitive for almost any farmer today. Next slide, Mark. So realizing that the future of this kind of small farming was in danger of just disappearing, the people in the community of Fort Collins mobilized to form a member-owned cooperative that would buy farmland and lease it to farmers on a long-term basis, usually 30 years, giving the farmer long-term land security without having to bear the capital costs. Next slide, please. So Pooter Valley Community Farms, which is the name of the organization, closed on their first farm just about 2 years ago, a 110-acre property that is now the home of Jodar Farms. Next slide. Which is a family operation raising wholesome pigs and chickens and lambs and turkeys. And happily, it appears that Pooter Valley Community Farms' second property will be the new home of Native Hill Farm. And as with what happened in the community of Westwood in Denver, people have come from all over the world to Fort Collins to study this innovative model, which is really the first of its kind in this country, maybe even in the whole world. This is truly a contagious center of aliveness, and it's a linchpin in the development of an emerging regional food system in northern Colorado. So that's the last slide. We can lose the slides now. Thanks. We can just take the slides off altogether. So a characteristic of centers of aliveness is that you can just feel how extraordinary they are. You can feel the aliveness and the sacredness of what they're doing. And the people who have founded them and those who are working with them, well, they're just some of the most humble and inspiring people you could ever hope to meet. They're often a bit like saints, and their commitment to service and to a greater vision of the future is really profound. And if you observe how these enterprises function, you quickly get the sense that something truly revolutionary is happening there. You just want to be with these people, to be part of what they're creating, to learn from them and to support them in any way you can. They are generative and highly contagious. And the great secret of monasteries historically and centers of aliveness is that they have always been carriers of the seeds of what we call the deep revolution, preserving the DNA of humanity's destiny. Now, you can't go to a university to learn about such things. There is no one book that explains all this. And although there are many now appearing that point to some of the fundamental premises here. So where can we go to learn about human destiny and the long arc of the moral universe and the role that we are being asked to fulfill in the deep revolution? Well, this entire exploration is essentially taboo in the context of a dying civilization. It's banned, it's marginalized, maybe even forbidden, because it's directly counter to the forces of colonization that have come to dominate human civilization. These forces of colonization represent resistance or opposition to the era of evolution. And their domination of humanity and the earth have produced the Anthropocene epoch of extinction. And this is one of the reasons why we felt we had no choice but to initiate the monastery, to establish one safe place where we can find the kind of education and training and support that will guide and empower us in our particular arenas of calling as evolutionary catalysts, as sacred activists, or as revolutionary entrepreneurs. And actually, we think that we're going to discover that we have to become all of those in one. But here we can learn and apply the principles of the evolution of the universe and begin to discover how we can become not only intentionally aligned with this sacred force, but how we can become its conscious agents, deep revolutionaries. Here we can learn the history of the deep revolution, and it goes back a long ways, and where it's taking us now. We can discover human destiny and our individual destiny within it. We can learn about and actually experience maybe even those mysterious spiritual beings who have been guiding the deep revolution for at least the last 10,000 years. And we can discover that we are in training to join forces with them, to take our place on the front lines of the deep revolution on this planet. So, in other words, in the monastery, we're learning how to ensure that what is most sacred and precious about being human does not go extinct, but instead flourishes in conscious partnership with the community of life on this living planet. Much like what's happening, at Morning Sky Ranch with what you're doing, Wayne. For thousands of years, monasteries and cloisters and convents and centers of aliveness have spontaneously arisen during times of civilizational collapse. They have emerged from all the great religions of the world, and we feel like we've been learning kind of from the inside something about why and how that happens. So we think of the monastery serving as sort of the spiritual home of the deep revolution. And those of us involved are fundamentally students of evolution and emergence and agents of the process by which they all unfold in all aspects of existence. And we're recognizing now that the sacred and the spiritual are penetrating into the physical universe, and that all evolution derives from that spiritual realm. And we humans are intimately involved in the process. So this has led us to the discovery of a really compelling vision of human destiny, the new humankind, we could say, that will finally emerge from this deep revolution. This is, we think, the new story that has been so profoundly missing in our civilization. So our role in a monastery is to recruit and educate and train and support individuals who are destined to play an important role in the deep revolution, initiating this next stage of human evolution, the new humankind. And these evolutionary catalysts and revolutionary entrepreneurs are preparing to take their place on the front lines. Together, we're walking the spiritual path of being evolutionary catalysts, angels of evolution, so to speak. And as the community of co-creators are accepting responsibility for the future of evolution of life and consciousness on this planet. Now, we can't easily categorize or summarize what we're doing at the monastery. If we say that we're an educational institution, for instance, that seems kind of shallow and misleading. Perhaps there's no currently known category that we fit into, no precedent for what we're attempting to bring into the world. So for now, we just refer to all this as the monastery, and perhaps sometimes the virtual monastery, although we do anticipate that one of these days it will become a landed monastery. But the monastery is kind of a metaphor, a place for holding the sacred and for becoming fully human. It's sort of an evolutionary boot camp, moving those who are truly called into the actualization of their calling in the world. So we offer some of the most rigorous training, preparing people who are really highly qualified candidates to become leaders and catalysts of the deep revolution. So the monastery is kind of a deep revolution academy. And the people who are showing up are deeply concerned about the future of humanity and the future of all life on this planet, and are driven by a profound passion to be of service to others. And many of them are expressing these currents in the creation of new businesses and organizations, whether for-profit or not, enterprises that contribute to human becoming. And these kinds of people especially love learning new skills and perspectives, and they're fearless about taking on monumental challenges. They've proven their capacity to mobilize people and resources for a cause, and constantly seek to do more and to be more. They're just relentless in their pursuit of increasing the impact of goodness in the world. And their creations are fundamentally aligned with the deep revolution, consciously or not. But conscious alignment can be an extraordinary accelerator of impact and scale. And this is certainly a key purpose of the training and support offered by the monastery. So the process of developing the curricula and the systems of support for revolutionary entrepreneurs and evolutionary catalysts, this has all been underway for a number of years, and there's still a lot to be developed, but already there are several opportunities for direct engagement in the deep revolution. And I want to just take a couple of minutes to point to a couple of these, and you can find out more about these at deeprevolution.net, our website. And the first opportunity is happening actually next week on June 26th through 28th, and what we're calling the Deep Revolution Convergence, the pandemic edition. This is a 3-day online gathering of evolutionary catalysts, sacred activists, and revolutionary entrepreneurs, where the focus is initiating the shift to the next phase of human evolution by, first of all, establishing that shift within ourselves and expanding and accelerating our capacity to mobilize people and resources in our own arenas of calling. So for some people who participate, the convergence will be an introduction and an orientation to the deep revolution, but this is also advanced experiential work, both for those who are new to the monastery and for those who are graduates of our courses. So For instance, we'll have an opportunity to learn and practice what we call the revolutionary mastermind process, which we think of as the first step towards co-creation, kind of holding each other's feet to the fire in this process of radicalization that we're all going through. This is a practice that can be applied almost anywhere and will profoundly support individuals in leading the deep revolution wherever they're called to serve. Then in early July, we're launching the next round of our premier course, A Deeper Calling. This is intense and rigorous training, a 13-week sort of evolutionary boot camp for those who are ready to take their place on the front lines of the deep revolution. They wind up with the perspectives, the tools, the processes, the training, and the network of support that will greatly accelerate them on their path as evolutionary catalysts. So these are coming up right away, the Convergence and the Deeper Calling course. So if either of those happen to strike a chord with you, please go to deeprevolution.net and explore joining us for those revolutionary experiences. In the fall, I'll just add this one piece, because it's finally becoming obvious that we need to localize our food supply everywhere. This fall, we're opening up a new edition of our original online course, the Local Food Academy. This is for people who know that they are called to the great challenge of building highly localized regional food systems in the area where they live. This is an extension of our first book, The Local Food Revolution, How Humanity Will Feed Itself in Uncertain Times, because its time has finally arrived here. So I think I'll stop there. You know, there's a lot more that we could say about what's coming up later this year and what is underway in the monastery, but perhaps that's enough for now to give you an idea of where we're heading and what's available right now. And again, you can find all the details on what we're offering at deeprevolution.net. And hopefully there are some questions.
Okay, before
I have some.
yeah,
Go ahead, Mark.
okay. So before I go to the questions, we go to the questions, I have the link to the PDF that you can download. Audience, you can click on the link that you see, and you'll be able to download the PDF version of this book that you see on the screen. And also, all the EAT members will get the link that you just saw on the screen. This link will be sent to you, to all the members of the EAT community, so that you can take advantage of this course and attend the boot camp or the course and learn from it. So with that said, Dr. Wayne Dorvan, take over.
Thank you, Mark. Gosh, there's a lot of you out there. Ask some questions. Simone said, by the way, Michael, thank you so much for sharing. And will there be a replay? Yes, there are replays of all of our presentations. We keep them live for everyone free for at least 10 days, sometimes up to a couple weeks. And then they become available for our elite members forever. And EAT free members, we sort of rotate them a little bit. And so, yes, there will be a replay, and Mark will edit it and get it out tomorrow or so. By the way, when Michael started, he said something that, honestly, he showed us again today, but I'll tell you, Friday, I'm not sure I've heard as much of a passion in a talk as Michael had for us on Friday. So the replay that I would recommend all of you really watch as well what he talked about on Friday, because he isn't just saying what you're hearing about academic addition and the deep revolution needs, he needs it. I mean, in a big way. So, Mark, Catherine just said she got an error in clicking the link. So I'm not sure. You might just check on that to make sure that it gets it. But anyway, guys, put in some questions because I'm going to go ahead and start and ask. Michael, I've followed what Pooter Valley Community Farms has been doing ever since they literally started their effort. And they had to really persist because they struggled a lot in the early time. The first property they looked at, they found out was immediately adjacent to the cement plant up there.
Yes, right.
A very good location. And this whole approach can work anywhere, and it'll work actually even better in places where the property values aren't so ridiculously high. Because these entities can be formed like Pooter Valley Community Farms anywhere in the country. And it is a cooperative, everybody. So, and there are different types of memberships, because I'm a member of it, for example, and I'm not a member that has the property rights. I'm a member for the food production side, because I provide some food products into the cooperative. You might just talk, if you would, a little bit about that, Michael, because I know a little bit of the details, but the cooperative works with memberships at a whole wide array of different types.
That's right, and that's part of the innovation of the whole enterprise. A multi-stakeholder cooperative is a fairly new animal, and they've had some assistance in designing that, but it's pretty revolutionary. So people can come in and participate in the cooperative at different levels, and it allows a lot of people in northern Colorado to participate in this, to actually be part of this really revolutionary development in our approach to small farming. And you're right, Wayne. The property values here in the Front Range are sort of falsely inflated, we could say, unrealistically inflated. But this model will work in many, many places, and it takes the burden of property ownership out of the bag that the farmer has that's already quite full. Property ownership is so much capital goes into property that most farmers can hardly afford to operate once they own the land. So it's pretty exciting, and I'm really glad that you're a member and that you're able to participate in the food production side of this. That's great.
Mark, it's not just one person. Several people are saying that the link doesn't work.
Yeah, I have no idea why, because it works on my end, and I can send them an email with the copy, because you just
everybody that is here, we know you're on, so we'll make sure we
send you a copy.
Put it into an email as an attachment also.
Right.
It's a very long link.
Yes, it's a long link, but
so
when I click it, it opens up. So I don't know. Anyway, everybody will get it. I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of this book.
By the way, I just clicked on it and it opened on mine too. So I don't know what's going with this. So we're just fine. Michael, what do you see in terms of innovation, like what Pooter Valley Community Farms has done, that maybe doesn't involve property ownership, but maybe it involves something where not necessarily producers, but processors or some others? Have you seen anything on other stages of the food, or retailers and so on? I mean, cooperatives, for example, in northern Colorado, for food sales have had a terrible history. There's just so many of them that have failed.
Yes.
One Estes Park, I was a member of that and one of the founders of it. And it lasted about 3 years and just didn't make it. And it's mainly because they had to price things a little bit higher than what they'd be in the grocery stores. And it was local food. It wasn't just stuff coming from General Mills.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I was very interested in what was happening in Estes Park. You know, I was on the board of the Boulder Food Cooperative as well. So it's been a rocky history of that kind of retail food co-op, and I think the problem is that farmers were not involved in the organization of those businesses. And so one of the things that's happened with the pandemic, you know, at first the farmers were thrown for a loop because they didn't know what to expect. Many of their customers, especially restaurants and institutional food buyers, you know, they just vanished. So they had no idea how they were going to sell their produce from this year, but they organized their own distribution system. You know, so they've been struggling with distribution for years, but they started to build a whole new distribution system, and I think that will result in a much larger system that's much more friendly to the farmers. So this disaster with food and with the pandemic has some silver linings to it, I think, in terms of being able to build a truly regional local food system.
So come on, guys. You guys are all here still, and you're just not putting any questions. I'm going to put it on someone. A person who's been incredibly active in the food movement here in northern Colorado, and Colorado in general. Elizabeth Nix, who at one time I think was even the president of the Permaculture Guild for Colorado.
Yeah.
Elizabeth's on here. She's in the audience. Elizabeth, you've got to have a question. I just got one here, though, from Marco. Why, and I think you said this on Friday, but why did you choose to call it monastery? Again, why don't you explain that? Because you said it Friday, but just quickly state that again.
Well, you know, we're definitely not religious. I mean, we are spiritually oriented, certainly, but we think of this as a secular monastery, and the role that we're playing here is much like the role that monasteries have historically played during times of civilization's breakdown. You know, they hold the sacred. They hold sort of the DNA of human's destiny, if you will, through the dark ages, you know, so that it can re-emerge on the other side of the dark ages. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
Monasteries haven't really changed in the way they operate for as long as we have written history.
Yeah, and there have been different kinds of monasteries, of course, but many of them have played crucial roles in the regions where they're located. I mean, they serve the community. They stimulate the local economy. They grow much of the community's local food. Sometimes they make great alcoholic beverages, you know. But they're a place of learning, you know, so people who have big callings, big responsibility in the world have a place where they can go for retreats, for learning, for training, for deepening in their own journey. So the monastery supports all those kinds of things.
Wow, that's appalling.
Yeah.
Let's hope I said one this time. Let's see. Come on, guys. More questions if you've got them. I've got one more. Michael, what do you see as maybe 2 years out that you can see yourself doing following up on the deep revolution? You've always, I know you're planning, you've always got planned out even farther than what you described.
Well, it's pretty hard to plan these days because circumstances are so unpredictable. But we will likely be doing more online events. You know, the day of in-person events may have just come to an end for a lot of us, which is just fine. It was always a struggle. We used to do these convergences physically here in Boulder, and always a struggle to get people coming from different parts of the world to be here physically for a few days. And some people just couldn't come at all. But now we can go right past that. So now we're looking at what does this make possible for us now? You know, can we expand our reach? So we like the idea of being a virtual monastery, and you know, we're just in the early stages of exploring what that means.
Jeffrey asks, and Jeffrey is also someone who has spoken with us and is a teacher and living in a very local economy mentality. He actually has a place upstate New York, but is in the city for a good portion of his time. So he says, can you share some of the experiences of students who have returned to their communities after participating in your programs? Just maybe some testimonials a little bit about what they've told you they've done.
Yeah, so first of all, they're not coming here, you know, to leave their communities and then go back. I mean, this is training that's ongoing while they're engaged. So I think of one of our longtime students, Del Myers, up in Prince George, British Columbia, who is raising grass-fed bison. You know, that he used to be a geologist and became a farmer. And he says, I said, aren't you a rancher? And he says, no, I'm a farmer. I raise grass. And so he's got these grass-fed bison, an amazing operation. And he sells everything he produces to people directly in the community. And he's very involved in food localization work there in that area, which is tough. I mean, it's tough everywhere, but it's particularly rough up there. So he's one example. You know, we have people not only in food, but in, you know, many other arenas as well. You know, but increasingly we're seeing how the principles of evolutionary development, evolutionary process can be applied very, very broadly. So that's why we're beginning to use the term revolutionary entrepreneur, because we see a lot of entrepreneurs these days, especially those who are learning about utilizing the internet to market and deliver their products and services. You know, it turns out that they're as deeply called as the sacred activists. You know, they just think about it differently. So we're doing a lot of work in that arena as well.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. Everybody be looking for, in an email, we'll send out the link to the PDF that I think some people are being able to download it, but we'll make sure you have it also in email. I'll be sending out an email in the next day or so with more information about the Deep Revolution Convergence and how you can become involved. And Michael, why don't you just end it with some finishing words, and as soon as you're done, Mark, you can take us out.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying that I forgot to mention, this Thursday evening, we're actually doing a live webinar called The Deep Revolution, Out of the Ashes. And we'd love for people to join us for that. Again, you can find out about it at deeprevolution.net. I think that'll get posted tonight.
Yes, I will.
So maybe I can just say that those of us who are following this path are kind of evolutionary warriors, deep revolutionaries. We're motivated by unseen forces for reasons that none of us can explain. And this happens to us, in places all over the world. We're moved at a very deep level to pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to the most important and most urgent cause of our time, the deep revolution, which is the reclamation of human freedom and sovereignty. This is what we volunteered for. This is our destiny. We are, in a way, the initiators or catalysts of this deep revolution. And we're among those who truly know in the core of our being the sacredness of life and the sacredness of being human. And, we rise up spontaneously and mysteriously from the exhausted soils of community, both rural and urban. We are steadily and unexpectedly transforming fractured landscapes. We're lovingly cultivating and rebuilding depleted soils. We're recovering and regenerating community in ways that kindle imaginations and infuse hearts with hope, really the only kind of hope that means anything these days. So together we're planting seeds of aliveness that are contagious, seeds which are taking root everywhere in the almost forgotten yearnings of people's hearts. Together we're slowly birthing a restorative economy that is so radically different from what our society has become that to others it might at first seem utterly alien or just impossibly unrealistic. But underneath it all, in this process of recovery, on this meandering path, we are finding our way home. We are becoming truly human. And as this world plunges headlong into an age of darkness, the Anthropocene, we somehow know in our hearts that out of the ashes of a dying civilization emerges something new and unexpected, what we're calling the new humankind. And we know that it will arrive because in our devotion and our commitment, we have preserved the very conditions conducive to life and have prepared the soil in which these precious seeds can be planted and at last bear fruit. So welcome to the Deep Revolution. And we'd love to see you at the Deep Revolution Convergence, the pandemic edition, next week, June 26th through 28th. And you can go to deeprevolution.net for the details, or if you'd like, you can email me directly at michael@deeprevolution.net. And that's all I have to say.
Awesome. And Mark will put all this into the replay post that we put up on the Eat site.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. You guys have come around, and Michael's been awesome as always. And we have Richard Lackey coming on next Monday, and I'll be speaking. And Mark and I, Arif and I will be talking on Thursday to you guys as our weekly Q&A, and we'll also talk more about Michael's program then. And we have a whole bunch more that are signed up to be talking in the weeks to come. So anyway, thanks everybody. We appreciate
Thanks,
you.
Wayne.
We love you. Go out there and make changes. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take it down, Mark.